They told him to speak. They demanded statements, reactions, explanations. The world watched, judged, decided, all while one man chose silence. Not because he had nothing to say, but because saying it too early would destroy the truth itself. Johnny Depp didn't disappear. He listened. He documented. He let court transcripts, sworn testimony, and recorded evidence do what noise never could. Real interviews exist. Real legal records exist. But the most dangerous part of this story isn't what was said, it's why he waited. Because when silence lasts this long, it's never empty. It's loaded. Silence, in public life, is often treated as guilt. When someone stops responding, the assumption fills the gap. Headlines don't wait. Timelines don't pause. And algorithms don't reward restraint. Yet that was exactly the environment Johnny Depp stepped into when accusations began to circulate globally. Instead of daily rebuttals or emotional press appearances, he chose a strategy that looked passive from the outside but was methodical underneath. People forget that before any courtroom cameras turned on, before verdicts trended online, there were sworn affidavits, depositions, medical records, text messages, audio recordings, and contracts quietly being assembled. Silence was not absence. It was preparation. Public opinion formed faster than facts. Major studios acted on perception, not findings. Depp was removed from projects before any civil verdict in the United States existed. That decision is documented in industry reporting and later referenced during litigation. What mattered legally was not how loud the narrative was, but whether it could survive cross-examination. That's why interviews from that period are scarce. Legal counsel routinely advises clients in active disputes to avoid public commentary because statements can be weaponized in court. This is not speculation. It is standard legal practice, cited by trial attorneys across defamation and civil cases. During this time, Depp's silence was contrasted with a media cycle that repeated claims without context. However, court filings later showed that many widely shared assumptions were incomplete or inaccurate. Audio recordings entered into evidence demonstrated mutual arguments rather than one-directional behavior. Text messages were timestamped and authenticated. Expert witnesses testified under oath about injuries, timelines, and inconsistencies. These are not internet theories. They are part of the official court record from the Virginia defamation trial, which was live-streamed and archived in full. One reason the silence felt unsettling is because audiences are conditioned to expect immediate statements. Apology videos, denial posts, damage control. But legal reality does not move at the speed of social media. Evidence has rules. Testimony has consequences. Perjury carries penalties. Depp's team understood that credibility would not be built on emotion but on verifiable material. That choice required enduring years of reputational damage without public defense. Most people would break under the pressure. Many advised him to speak earlier. He did not. There were moments he could have shifted public sympathy with a single interview. Outlets reached out. Journalists later confirmed requests that went unanswered. Again, not because there was nothing to say, but because timing matters. Once words are spoken publicly, they exist forever. If even one sentence conflicts with later sworn testimony, opposing counsel will exploit it. Silence protected consistency. When he finally did speak in a structured legal setting, the contrast was striking. Instead of vague language, answers were specific. Dates were referenced. Documents were cited. Under oath, Depp acknowledged his own flaws without conceding false claims. This balance is critical in court. Absolute denial often damages credibility. Partial acknowledgement paired with evidence carries more weight. Legal analysts commenting on the trial noted this repeatedly. Interview references after the verdict also matter. In post-trial coverage, Depp stated that his goal was not revenge but restoration of truth. This aligns with the relief sought in defamation cases, which centers on reputational harm. The jury's verdict confirmed that at least some published statements met the legal threshold for defamation under U.S. law. That outcome does not mean perfection or sainthood. It means the evidence met a specific standard. The silence before that moment now looks different in hindsight. It wasn't avoidance. It was insulation. By letting the court speak first, Depp avoided contaminating the legal process. Only after testimony, verdicts, and judgments were finalized did he address the public more directly. That sequence matters. Another overlooked factor is contractual obligation. Film studios, insurers, and financiers often include morality clauses and communication restrictions during disputes. Speaking out can trigger additional consequences unrelated to the case itself. Silence can be a form of compliance, not fear. Audience behavior also played a role. Online discourse during the early years was hostile and polarized. Engagement favored outrage over nuance. Any statement, no matter how carefully phrased, would have been clipped, reframed, and redistributed without context. Silence denied that cycle fuel. This does not mean silence is always the right choice. In many cases, early clarification prevents misinformation. But this situation was already entangled in legal timelines and prior publications. Once allegations are formally published, responses shift from public relations to legal strategy. Proof matters. Interviews exist where Depp discusses his childhood, substance struggles, and artistic identity. These interviews predate the legal conflict and establish a consistent self-portrayal. During trial, opposing counsel attempted to use selective quotes from old interviews. Context was restored through full transcripts. Again, preparation mattered. The moment he finally broke his silence publicly was not explosive. It was measured. Statements were released through legal representatives. Later interviews were reflective, not reactive. That restraint reinforced credibility. He did not declare victory over individuals. He emphasized process and truth. This story is uncomfortable because it challenges the belief that speaking louder equals being right. Sometimes the opposite is true. Sometimes silence is not weakness but discipline. Not hiding, but holding. The cost of the choice was enormous. Lost roles, public ridicule, financial strain, and personal isolation. But the payoff was alignment between words and record. The title asks why he stayed silent until this moment. The answer is not mystery. It is method. Legal timelines, evidentiary standards, risk management, and patience. Uncomfortable patience. And this is where part 1 ends, not with resolution, but with understanding. Because the silence was never the end of the story. It was the foundation for what came next. The foundation built in silence only becomes visible when pressure is applied. When the courtroom opened and cameras rolled, the difference between narrative and record finally had a frame. Johnny Depp didn't arrive with a speech prepared for the internet. He arrived with exhibits, binders, timestamps, witnesses who swore oaths. The shift was subtle but powerful. For the first time in years, the story was no longer being told by headlines or commentary, but by process. What many people missed is that this moment was never about convincing everyone. Courtrooms are not popularity contests. Juries are instructed to ignore noise and evaluate evidence. That is why so much of the case unfolded slowly, sometimes painfully detailed. Audio clips were played in full, not as fragments. Messages were read with dates attached. Experts explained methodology instead of offering opinion. This environment favors preparation over performance. One of the strongest elements was consistency. Across multiple days of testimony, answers aligned with previously submitted documents. That alignment is difficult to fake over long examinations. Opposing counsel is trained to find contradictions. When they fail, it matters. Legal commentators later noted that credibility is often built not by dramatic moments, but by the absence of collapse. There is also the question of why he didn't speak sooner if he believed the truth was on his side. The answer circles back to risk. Early public statements would not have stopped studios from acting on perception. They would not have reversed media narratives. But they could have damaged admissibility. Courts scrutinized public statements for motive and bias. Silence avoided the trap. Another overlooked layer is jurisdiction. Earlier legal action took place in the United Kingdom, under a different standard. Defamation law varies by country. Outcomes there were interpreted globally without nuance. Yet legal professionals understood that a different jurisdiction with a jury trial would evaluate evidence differently. Waiting allowed the appropriate forum to hear the full case. Throughout the proceedings, references were made to contemporaneous records, medical notes, security logs, travel schedules. These are not emotional artifacts, they are operational. They either exist or they don't. The accumulation of such material over time gave weight to testimony. Silence made space for that accumulation. The public often expects a single moment of revelation, a confession, a dramatic reversal. Reality is messier. Truth emerges through repetition and verification. The reason this moment felt heavy is because it represented years of deferred explanation finally given structure. Not in an interview, but in a record that can be reviewed, cited, and challenged. After the verdict, reactions were polarized. Some saw vindication. Others saw complexity. What matters legally is narrower. A jury found that certain statements met the criteria for defamation. That is a precise finding, not a blanket judgment of character. Depp acknowledged the nuance in later comments. He did not claim moral purity. He claimed factual correction. Interviews after the trial were notably restrained. When asked why he endured silence, he referenced trust in the process. That phrase can sound hollow, but in this context it aligns with observable choices. He allowed cross-examination. He accepted scrutiny. He did not settle quietly. Those decisions carry risk. Audience behavior also shifted. Clips from the trial circulated widely, but this time they were grounded in context. People could watch entire exchanges, not just summaries. That access changed perception for many. Transparency replaced speculation. Silence had preserved the ability to let the transparency speak. There is a cost to waiting that is rarely acknowledged. Reputational damage does not reverse instantly. Roles are not automatically restored. Relationships are not magically repaired. Silence protects truth, but it does not protect comfort. Choosing it requires accepting loss in the short term for coherence in the long term. This story resonates because it confronts a modern reflex. The urge to respond immediately. To correct every misstatement. To defend identity in real time. Sometimes that reflex serves us. Sometimes it undermines us. This case suggests that there are moments when restraint is the stronger move. Proof was not just presented, it was tested. Opposing witnesses testified. Experts were challenged. Objections were raised and ruled on. The process was adversarial by design. Silence beforehand ensured that when the moment came, the focus stayed on evidence rather than explanation. The phrase, "until this moment," implies delay with purpose. Not fear, not avoidance, but alignment. Words spoken at the wrong time can disappear into noise. Words supported by record endure. That is the difference. As the dust settled, statements released emphasized gratitude to the jury and respect for the court. No victory lap. No accusations. That tone reinforced the credibility built earlier. Consistency does not end with the verdict. It continues after. The lesson here is not about celebrity. It is about strategy. About understanding when speaking helps and when it harms. About recognizing that truth does not always need volume, but it does need structure. Silence, in this case, was not empty space. It was a container, filled slowly with documents, testimony, and patience. When it finally opened, it did not explode. It explained. And that is why the silence mattered. Not because it hid the truth, but because it protected it long enough to be heard. If this story changed how you see silence, don't keep it to yourself. Share your perspective below, because real understanding grows through conversation, not noise. Support content that values evidence over reaction and patience over pressure. If you want more deep, fact-based storytelling around public figures like Johnny Depp, stay connected and keep engaging. Your attention decides which stories get told with care and which ones get lost in shortcuts.